Hello everybody and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Balthazar.
And that was a massive disappointment.
I think that's an understatement.
Yeah, I agree. We lost the snow game, 42-35, something like that. The snow honestly may have been what killed us. And there are a lot of things. This is going to be a more free-form episode than we typically do. We're not going to do game day grades, at least not very, like in our traditional sense. We may just do them like quickly, but that's a maybe. It's just going to be a more free-form episode, sort of talking about the entirety of the game. But for me, I couldn't go to this game. I stayed home with my parents as a part of Thanksgiving celebrations, helping decorate the house for Christmas and stuff like that. So I got to witness things from the broadcasting angle, which, that gave me a certain perspective. But Connor, what did you see as the boots on the ground, sideline reporter here?
It was just a really strange game, all in all, because it never really felt like it should have been the way it was, but I think that's because the offense was on the field for so long. I mean, we had 42 minutes of possession in this game compared to 17 minutes and 48 seconds for Iowa State. And, of course, the numbers been thrown around a lot. Iowa State did, I think, 35 plays, ran, I think, 102 plays. So it didn't really feel like, at least for a decent chunk of the game, like Iowa State was like the controlling party, but like it really became apparent late. Long touchdown after long touchdown. We just couldn't stop them. I saw today that Iowa State never ran a play in the red zone.
No, they didn't.
In this game, which I think tells the story of it. But, I mean, from the stands, it was just inexplicable. I was sitting there with the people I was sitting with, and we were trying to figure out what it was specifically that Iowa State was doing that we just could not figure out, and we genuinely had no idea. They weren't really doing anything particularly out of the ordinary. There wasn't anything that they did that we hadn't seen, this year. So I think that you're probably right. The only different element in this game compared to all of our other games was the snow. So that's probably the culprit. Because otherwise, it would be wildly unlikely to give up 4 touchdowns of 60 yards or more in a single game.
Yeah, on the broadcast, the snow, like I said, I think that's genuinely what killed us. And the main reason I say that, and you can say that this is copium all you'd like, but the defense that Klanderman runs is predicated largely off of speed and aggression. And whenever you are going fast in snow, it makes it very hard to change directions. So your margin of error for aggression gets so much smaller. And I think the best example of that, there are like 5, however many long touchdowns they scored. But the best example was the dump-off pass to Jalen Knoll, where we had 5 or 6 people on that side of the field, and all of them missed because 2 of them took 3 of them took bad angles, and the other 2 slipped because they were trying to adjust their angles. And that was pretty much the entire game. It was just the defense being unable to figure out how to play in the snow, which, it's really tough, and I know it sounds like a massive dose of copium to say, if there wasn't snow, we would have blown out Iowa State. No, that's still true. That is very true. But, you deal with the hands you're dealt. And the defense had undoubtedly the worst tackling game I have seen in the Kleiman era. And I would imagine, I'm going to defer to you on this, but I'm going to stake the claim here, probably one of the worst tackling games in K-State history.
This, in terms of tackling performances, is probably up there with 2020 Texas, 2010 Nebraska, 2007 Nebraska, I guess. Maybe 08. I can't. whichever one they dropped 70 on our heads. It was one of those 2 years. Then, there's another game I was thinking of. I can't quite recall right now, but this is just an all-time just disgusting performance defensively. I'm trying to think. 2018 Oklahoma was pretty bad.
Yeah.
For tackling. But yeah, this may take the cake, I think, especially given just how few plays they ran. The fact that Iowa State was averaging, I think, over 15 yards per play is mind-boggling.
They were averaging 1.2 points per play.
Yeah, that's the sort of stat that you might see points per possession for basketball. That'd be a really efficient night for basketball. That's unheard of in football. It was definitely weird to watch live just because it didn't feel like it was happening quite that often, just because they just didn't have the ball that much. And because we were controlling the ball and controlling the clock so much, it didn't feel quite that way until it really started to hit me in the second half, just how bad it was. Especially because in the first half, we had those 2 field goal drives that probably should have been touchdowns, but we drained a lot of clock with those drives. This was just a defensive meltdown of proportions that I don't think I've ever seen from a K-State defense that wasn't 2020 Texas was bad, but we were playing linebackers at safety on purpose. And I don't, that COVID season was weird. I don't hold that against them. I think really the last time it was this bad, even close, was probably 2010 Nebraska. And that defense was a lot worse than the one that we saw for the rest of this season. I mean, there's really nothing you can take from it other than Nate Matlick individually had a pretty solid night. He had a couple of tackles for loss, and he tracked a screen down at one point that would have been a huge gain, but he single-handedly stopped it. Beyond Nate Matlick, I don't think a single defensive player had a redeemable performance. And I don't think I've ever said that about any side of the ball, where so many people just were awful all at once.
Yeah, I think it's, pardon the pun, I guess, pardon the, whatever the wordplay, it was the worst possible storm for K-State, and it's just, you can't have that happen at any time. And I said it earlier, and I'm going to probably say it 10 more times. The defense that K-State runs is predicated a lot off of aggression and speed. And whenever you're able to turn that speed against them, which is why counters tend to work pretty well against K-State, that's how you win the game. Unfortunately, Iowa State didn't have to do that because the snow did. And I think there are also a few times that, and I don't like calling out effort of players, but there was a few times that I thought that effort was sort of lacking. The number one time that I'm thinking of is Will Lee literally just bumping the back of Abusama to try and tackle him, and then that ended up being a touchdown. He literally gave him a boost.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that, you don't even do in middle school. I have a very vivid memory of being in a middle school football game and watching one of our safeties do that to someone and the exact same result happening. That's just not how leverage works. If you're running behind somebody and you shove them like that, unless you hit them perfectly or are going way faster than they are, then they're just going to get a boost from that probably. If they have anything resembling contact balance. Which, at that point, he had probably already crossed 150 yards, so we should probably have been aware by that point. I mean, Abusama finished with 16 carries for 276 yards and 3 touchdowns, 17.3 yards per carry. And in a era where Chuba Hubbard rushed for 300 against us, Bijan rushed for 200 something last year. Devin Neal just tore us up last week. And that was only for 140. This was the most embarrassing performance we've ever put up against any running back, because this was Iowa State's fourth string running back coming into this season. Jirel Brock sent to the Shadow Realm forever for gambling, and they didn't bring their top 2 running backs who are still on the roster. So this is RB4 for Iowa State, going for 276. A true freshman, Abu Sama.
And it's not because he is that good. He's a solid back. He's a perfectly fine back. There is no universe in which he should run for more than 50 yards on K-State. But yet, here it is in the worst possible day and the worst possible time. And we've already used the title of Murphy's Law for an episode title. I think this one may be a way better time to use that title. But, to sort of get off of this subject before we inevitably return to it again, this was K-State's senior day. And, this is not at all how you want the senior day to go. You just kind of feel bad for a lot of the guys who ended up walking. Your players like Cody Stufflebean and... all right, the big one is Will Howard to me.
Leading with Cody Stufflebean was an interesting choice.
Yeah, but... my fault. But he was just the first person that came to mind. On Will Howard, because this will be a pretty extensive discussion, I think that this was the last time that we will see Will Howard play at Bill Snyder Family Stadium. And I wish that this was a better ending for him. I wish that the season had a better ending for him. But, here we go again. Stop saying that this was on Will, because that is the most subhuman mongoloid brainlet take that I have ever heard in my life. He led an offense to putting up 35 against one of the best defenses in the Big 12. And yeah, sure, he didn't have the greatest second half, but he still only turned the ball over one time. None of this was on Will. And I just get really tired of seeing people blame Will for things that aren't his fault. But, this was probably Will's... Well, it was almost certainly Will's last game in Bill Snyder Family Stadium. I imagine, I don't know what he does for the bowl game, if he decides to go pro, if he transfers out, but, I just want people to appreciate what Will did and has done for the program, and I don't think that saying that this loss was exclusively on Will when the defense had the tackling game that they did, I don't even think Will is 5% of the reason K-State lost this game.
Yeah. When you allow a quarterback for Iowa State and Rocco Becht to complete 8 passes for 230 yards, that's almost 30 yards per completion. That's 28.75 yards per completion. And he, on 8 of his completions, 3 of them are touchdowns. That's just not on Will. That is on whoever it was covering Knoll the first time that slipped and didn't finish the coverage. Whoever it was that got mossed by Jaden Higgins.
That was Coley McAllister.
The 5 or 6 people that weren't able to contain Jalen Knoll on a 3rd and 16. I mean, this is a solely on the defense loss. And there's been times this year where Will has really been the main reason for a loss, like the Oklahoma State game. That was pretty much solely on Will's shoulders. So I do feel like there's at least some history of us being pretty fair in how we judge Will. But I really don't understand some of the people that are blaming this loss on Will, other than I think it's an instinctual knee-jerk reaction, and it's a lot easier to point and blame at the guy that you never liked than to take longer than the 5 seconds it takes to tweet something, to think about what actually happened. But I mean, that most people don't really want to take the time to actually critically think anyways, so it's not too surprising. I really don't think that blaming Will, I don't think there's any logical sense to it. I don't think there's emotional sense to it either. I think it's untruthful in pretty much every measurable way, because every number on the stat sheet, every play that you can watch on the field, the eye test and the analytics say that this loss was pretty much entirely on the defense. The only things that you could say on the offense were that we probably should have converted those first quarter possessions into touchdowns instead of field goals. But when you're in the first quarter, you shouldn't have to worry about being the first of 40 against Iowa State, an offense that has not been spectacular this year, or really most of the time under Matt Campbell. So I can't put this on the offense at all. This is mostly on the defense for not at really any point being able to step up and be clutch. Will still didn't have a good game, I think. I think he really had a kind of a bad game, but I don't think that he was the reason for the loss. And I think that you can have a bad game but not be the reason that the team lost, and not even be close to that. Because we saw Will not have a very good game against KU when we won, but Will still didn't have a great game against Iowa State, but he was the last reason that K-State lost that game.
Yeah. And I do want to give some props to the offense. I don't want this to be an exclusively negative episode, and I know it may be a little late to provide positivity 17 minutes into the episode, but the offense, generally, the pieces looked good, and it looked like a cohesive unit for quite a long time. DJ looked really good. Trayshawn looked good as the RB2. Jace Brown solidified himself as this year's wide receiver 1, just because he has an insane tendency to separate even against TJ Tampa, which, by the way, I think the game was called fairly for both sides, but there was definitely, on both sides, missed holdings on defense. And sometimes I think that's just because, it's hard to see. But I think the offense had a really good game, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Ben Sinnott having, I think probably, it might be the best game of his career. Could be second best, depending on if you're looking at 21 or 22 Oklahoma. But I really liked the way the offense played, and I want to give massive roses to the offensive line for how well they played as well. Iowa State was barely getting any pressure. The run fits were generally very rarely blown. They were able to block the run assignments very well. Weren't missing a lot on the pass block assignments. So a bundle of roses to the offensive line. MVPs to Ben Sinnott and Jace Brown in terms of offensive actual plays. But, the offense can play just as well as they would like, but it all comes back to, it doesn't matter if you can't hold an offense starting a redshirt freshman quarterback and a guy who had maybe seen, I think he before this game had 15 total yards of offense, and he gets 277 of them. That's not a winning formula. You don't win those. No one wins those.
Yeah, and it probably should be stated, just this sort of game is probably never going to happen again. I mean, I can't think of a time where a team has lost a game to a team that never stepped in the red zone. I can't think of a time where a play disparity has been this wide and the team with more plays hasn't won. I mean, 102 plays to 35-ish. I mean, that should be easy victory 99% of the time for the 100-plus play team. There's so much that's just inexplicable about how this game went down, how weird it was. That does make it peak Farmageddon in a lot of ways, where this is just one of the strangest outcomes to a football game that can ever be had. Obviously, we're not really appreciating the strangeness of that, given that we're on the losing end of it. But there was just a lot weird about the game, given that it was a heavy snow game. We've not had one of those in a really, really, really long time. It was I think they said the first game with snow accumulation since Nebraska in 2000, but that game only started snowing in like the fourth quarter. It snowed pretty consistently the entire game for Farmageddon this year, which I enjoyed. I thought it was super fun. So this loss, I'm definitely very disappointed, and I guess we could talk a bit about the season after this, but I still had fun at this game. Among K-State losses, this is one of the ones that has hurt the least, just because the experience of the snow game is super fun. I'm glad I finally got to get one. I've been wanting to go to one for a long time. Sucks that we lost, but it was definitely the Farmageddon game ever. And I was about to say I don't think we'll ever lose a game like this again, but for the next 2 years we still play Iowa State, so we could absolutely lose a game like this again.
Yeah, Connor, I appreciate your input, especially on the snow game. If I ever see K-State play in the snow again, it'll be too soon. I don't want to do that again.
You know what? I hope that we play in the snow again. I think if we play in the snow again, we now have a game of practice, so we know what to work on.
Yep.
And maybe next time there's a snow game, we'll be playing like Arizona State.
Play an air raid team.
I more meant a team from a warm area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that's fair. Yeah, but do you want to... we can talk a little more generally about MVPs. Offensive MVPs, I'm going to go Ben Sinnott. Defensive MVP, no one, but I guess Nate Matlick.
Yeah, I'm going to say Ben Sinnott offensively, and I would say Nate Matlick, but I'm not really feeling inclined to hand out an MVP just for the performance. So Nate would get one, but unfortunately he doesn't because they can't behave. So
yeah,
no one gets an MVP.
Y'all can't behave. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think another game like this is ever going to happen again. I think that if all conditions were normal, Iowa State probably loses this game, and I think they probably lose it by a lot because the defense is actually able to play their game. But again, that's not what happened. That's not what happened, and that's not what was going to happen. So I guess now we can talk. We'll obviously do an episode that's like a full season recap. But just starting off to talk about it, I mean, 8-4 is where we end our regular season. After aspirations of going to Arlington this year and a changed tiebreaker that ultimately didn't end up mattering. We had aspirations of going to Arlington this year. We lost to MU, who ended up being a top 10 team in the country. I still have mixed feelings about that. And then lost a head scratcher to Oklahoma State. Lost a game we predicted we'd lose against Texas. And then lose the weirdest game I've ever seen up against Iowa State. And if you would have told, I think, any K-State fan at the beginning of the season that we went 8-4 and missed Arlington, I feel like a lot of people would be disappointed, and I feel like just about every K-State fan would be disappointed. I'm a little disappointed, and I understand how we got there. But, it's sad, it sucks, but it's where we are. I mean, there's not... Okay, well, I'll ask this question after you give your general thoughts on basically mirror the thoughts of what I just said about your grand expectations, I suppose.
Well, yeah, we came into this year saying we think the K-State has a chance to go like 10-2, 11-1, and face Texas in Arlington for like a rematch. And we thought that K-State had a chance to beat everybody on their schedule, with the exception of Texas. And if you go down the schedule, that is kind of how the season played out, except this year was kind of the opposite of last year. Where last year we got a lot of the breaks that we needed, and this year we just did not get that. And that's just how college football goes. And this year ultimately is a disappointment because our goals and aspirations were to make it to the Big 12 title, and the team themselves said in the offseason they had playoff aspirations, big bowl aspirations, and we're going to be lucky to make the Pop-Tarts Bowl at this point. Some people are saying we might make the Texas Bowl at this point, which is a fine bowl game. There's nothing wrong with that bowl game, but it's a massive step down from where you want to be. So I think this is probably the most disappointing season in the Kleiman era. The first year was a surprisingly good year. 2020 was just a weird season that we can hardly count. 2021 ended on a high note, so I think that we left that season with optimism and in a fairly good spot. And then, of course, 2022, that's a successful year. We win the Big 12, and that's good. But this is kind of the first time that we've taken a notable step back, I feel like. And it's going to be interesting to see how we respond with that. But I'm pretty disappointed in how this year ended, especially because I think all of our losses could have very easily gone the other way. We were in several one-possession games this year. We lost most of them, and that's super frustrating. All of our losses were by one possession or overtime games. We probably should have beat Mizzou on the road. We probably should have beat Texas on the road. Oklahoma State was a 6-point game, although we probably didn't deserve to win that game. Maybe head-to-head we should have on paper at a neutral site, but weird things happen in Stillwater. This Iowa State game was the first game where we really, truly
blew it.
Kind of blew it. It feels, like we were just dominated this game. Although Oklahoma State's maybe in that same category. This is going to be a season that when you are looking down a list of season records for K-State and you see like 2022 Big 12 champions, 9-4, 10-4, you're going to be like, wow, it was a big year. Then you're going to kind of skip over the 2023 season because it's going to be like 8-5 or 9-4, depending on if we win the bowl game. And then whatever the next few years are. And people aren't going to look back and be like, oh, yeah, well, we nearly beat Texas in overtime that year. We nearly beat Missouri. We nearly beat Oklahoma State. We were like 4 possessions away from going 12-0. like people aren't going to remember that. People are going to mainly remember from this season that it was a massive missed opportunity for K-State football to really take another step forward and help establish itself as a power in the future Big 12. Because after this year, when we had the opportunity to really kind of make ourselves like that next one up for the future of the Big 12, instead we've left the door wide open. And there's not a clear successor for the seat of power in the conference right now, which is pretty concerning to me.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the new schools coming in, Arizona's on the up and up. Utah will always be good when they have Whittingham. Oklahoma State will always pull devil magic whenever you have no expectations for them and then be mid the moment you do, which means that they'll be mid next year. But, I 100% agree with you. This was K-State's chance, like this year, to prove that they will be the class of the new Big 12. And they didn't. Like, just straight up, flat out, they did not prove this year that they have what it takes to be the class of the new Big 12. Does that mean that I think it's impossible for them to be? No. They just didn't prove it this year, and this was a massive year to make that step. So here's the big question. You and I have both used the word disappointment in terms of this season. There are a lot of people who, perhaps understandably, use the word, instead of using the word disappointment, they use the word failure. I don't necessarily like the word failure in this context. I think this is certainly Kleiman's floor. I've gone on record saying that I think Kleiman's floor in a regular season that doesn't have everyone on the roster getting injured is 8-4. And in some respects, it is really disheartening to see that arguably the most experienced roster and one of the more talented rosters that Kleiman, well, I don't want to say he's the most talented roster he'll ever have, because look at the recruiting classes he's bringing in. But, just the experience on the roster, and then you go 8-4. I don't want to say it's a failure, because it's the floor. I don't ever think that meeting your floor is a failure. You can be disappointed in it all you want because you expect more. But I hesitate to call it an outright failure. I'm just curious as to what you think about that, because I understand why people would consider it a failure.
I think it really just depends on the lens you look at it through, because I think a pretty reasonable way to look at it would result in it being a failure, because the preseason expectation for a majority of the fan base was a return to Arlington, and we not only missed that, but we did not even put ourselves in a position to really be close when it was all said and done. And I think going 8-4, missing Arlington in the regular season, I can't blame anybody that wants to classify that as a failure for the goals that we set this year. I don't think 8-4 is necessarily a failure in an abstract sense. Like, you're still getting to a bowl game, you're still well above 500, but I don't think that we should look at that as a good season. I think we need to have higher expectations than 8-4, and I think that we all agree on that. So how do I look at it, though? I'm undecided on if I'm going to call this a genuine failure, but if I'm not, it's very close, because I think everyone can agree that this year's really ended with kind of a dull thud and as a massive disappointment of a season. I'm very close to calling it a failure. A lot of that stems from just so much of this year just kind of ending as like the year of missed opportunity. And in a lot of ways, we really controlled our destiny at a lot of points in this season. And every time we had the opportunity to take a step forward and make it more likely for ourselves that we would move on and get back to Arlington, we blew it. We were anti-clutch this year. Everyone we faced, we were either blowing them out or we lost, with the exception of the KU game. And that's a little disconcerting. But I'm not really sure what else to say other than I think I may have talked myself into this being a failure of a season. I'm still going to watch the bowl game, and I'm still really excited. Just because I say it's a failure of a season doesn't mean I think it was an outright bad season. I think those are different things, because I think we failed to reach the goals that we set for ourselves, which was getting back to Arlington, and we didn't do that, obviously. So that in of itself is a failure. But going 8-4, we still had some really great performances. We saw some young players really show out. We saw some newcomers do some really good things. And there's still the opportunity for a bowl win against a quality opponent. And there's still an opportunity there for us to see some younger players maybe take a step forward. We've also got a lot of guys that I think next year will take another step. We're probably going to have a different quarterback next year if we were guessing. And I think that the fan base, despite what obviously we're huge Will Howard fans, but the fan base may just need a refresh at this point and unite, and someone they can get behind as a united front. You know, that it may just be time for that. And I think maybe everybody's in agreement on that. But I think when we look back at the season in 20 years, I think we'll look at it as a failure, I think.
You also mentioned the new quarterback, and my biggest fear is that no one will ever be happy. That's my biggest fear, because I saw the calls for Avery. I understood the calls for Avery. people don't understand that Avery is still 18 years old.
I think you're right, though, on a lot of people will never be happy with the quarterback. And I think that there is one distinct reason for that, if you'll give me the chance to explain this. This is something I've thought about since I was like a junior at K-State. Honestly, since before then, back in 2019, so I was a sophomore. I've thought this for a while. I think that most K-State fans will always be disappointed with the quarterback position because most K-State fans are Chiefs fans and they watch Patrick Mahomes throw the ball on Sundays. I think that's why most K-State fans are always going to struggle watching a quarterback that isn't this alien elite future Hall of Famer that can do anything, and the only time he ever fails is when he's let down by the people around him.
Or he gets bored.
Yeah, or he gets bored. And that's it. That's the only time that he ever does anything wrong. And even then, he can do no wrong in the eyes of Chiefs fans for the most part. And he's the best quarterback to be he's the best NFL quarterback right now. When his career's done, he'll probably be the best quarterback to ever play the game. And how are you going to go from watching that on Sundays to watching a kid who is definitely not Patrick Mahomes on Saturdays quarterback your favorite college team? I think that's at least part of it, that a lot of K-State fans will probably never be satisfied at the quarterback position. I don't think that's any fault of K-State fans. I mean, watching Patrick Mahomes is super fun. There's a reason people like Patrick Mahomes. He's really good at football. But, like, I do think that there's maybe some of that. Like, I remember back in 2019, a lot of people used to tell me that they hated Skylar Thompson. Skylar Thomps's awful. You know, Skylar Thompson's a horrible quarterback. I hate watching him. He can't make, like, these, like, crazy throws. And he's like, what? And they're like, what quarterback can't do that? And it's, well, you're watching Mahomes.
All of them.
Yeah, most human quarterbacks can't make those throws. That's why there's like 500 college teams and 32 NFL teams. So there's a reason for that. But I do think Avery Johnson's going to be a rallying force for K-State. I'll try and end this on a positive note because I've been a little critical, I feel like. Avery, I think, pretty much unanimously is already loved right now by K-State fans. I think that everybody at minimum is going to be starting from the same place with Avery Johnson next year. I think don't do that.
Sorry, I was staring directly at my desk because I just imagined every possible bad outcome. But please, I'll get into that in a minute. Just please finish.
I think next year when we're starting the season at like 6 p.m. because we always start at 6 p.m. against UT Martin, and Avery Johnson's trotting out for his first start as a quarterback for K-State. I think everyone's going to kind of be in the same spot.
The receiver start.
Yeah. That I'm glad you caught that. But he, I feel like Will, for pretty much his entire career, has been at varying points or at varying levels for the fan base. There's been people who have always supported him, like we've pretty much always unconditionally supported him. But there's always been a lot of people that, you know, have pretty much at no point supported him. And I'm not going to make that comparison. But the...
I'll ask after the episode.
Please do. But he was definitely divisive as a K-State quarterback. There's no doubt about that. He was one of the most divisive K-State quarterbacks I have ever seen. Maybe the most ever. But Avery Johnson was a massive recruiting win. He's an in-state kid. Everybody loves him because he always seems to be doing all this like good stuff out in public and just like seems to have great PR. He had his like big like coming out party against Texas Tech and seems to be on the right track and can kind of be the like air quotes face of a franchise, like sort of quarterback for K-State going forward. So I think that the quarterback situation going forward is pretty positive, but it ultimately comes down to how he performs because as we have seen, opinions can change quick. So for Avery's sake, I hope he performs.
Thank you for setting me up with like the perfect layup transition there. I have watched this fan base, and I'm just gonna outright steal the line from Scott Wildcat. Fan is short for fanatic, but that doesn't mean that it has to be short for idiot. That doesn't mean that it has to be short for someone who is stupid. And K-State as a fan base has had the tendency to, the moment anything goes wrong, it is, oh, this guy sucks. Why is X playing over Y? Let me clarify something. That sometimes there is a pattern, and sometimes that statement is correct. However, that has to happen like 4 or 5 times for it to become a pattern and for it to be correct. K-State fans do it at step 0.5. They will see a single incomplete pass and go, oh, this guy sucks. What's going on here? Oh, he made like a bad read because someone was lurking underneath the route and he didn't see him. This guy sucks. My biggest fear is that Avery is going to have a young quarterback game. And then what? Like that is my biggest fear, is how the K-State fan base responds to that. Because there's a certain sense of entitlement that I think K-State fans have, and you mentioned it by watching Patrick Mahomes. And I think that that's a very good point. But I think Avery will be a very good quarterback. Let me clarify something right off the bat. I think Avery has the potential to be the best quarterback that has ever walked through K-State. I think he has that sort of potential. He has first-round draft pick potential. He has top 10 pick potential. But potential is a fickle thing, is a fickle mistress. And the worst thing that you can do to someone who has a lot of potential is try to force them early into it. I think Will had a potential to be even better than he is. And I already think he is a good quarterback. But he was forced into a situation too early. People turned on him very quickly because they weren't what they expected. They weren't what they wanted him to be. And then suddenly the entire fan base turns against him. And I don't think that Avery will have to deal with that to the same extent. Because Avery is... This is no disrespect towards him. Avery is the golden child right now who can do no wrong. And that's fine. He's a Kansas kid. He's a highly recruited, quarterback. And like I said, he has potential to be the best quarterback that K-State has ever seen. I just really worry about how the fan base, who has seen what good quarterback play looks like and actively shunned it, what they will do when a quarterback who has all the potential in the world but hasn't reached that potential yet, I'm scared to death of how they'll react.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think Avery probably gets a longer leash, whether we like it, you and me, like it or not. And I think he deserves a longer leash than what Will got, because I think Will deserved a longer leash, period. But I think Avery deserves patience. I think he still, though, has shown to be very dynamic. He's shown that athletically he's ready, and his decision-making will get there, I think. Because we have seen him make some great decisions and make some great throws, but there's also been multiple times that he has not made the right choice. And that's okay. That's fine, because we want quarterbacks to make mistakes early in their career, because that is the best time to do it, when, it's not like a Big 12 title on the line. It's, oh no, we almost threw a pick against Texas, and we were already losing, but it was dropped. So that's okay. That's fine. That's fine. And I think that a reason to be fine. I think that with an offseason of him as the guy, I'm going to have pretty high expectations for him next year, but I'm not going to lose my mind if he doesn't perfectly meet them. I'm not going to lose my mind if he isn't immediately what we hope for, but he may be that. So I guess I'm hoping that the K-State fan base treats Avery differently than they treated Will. And I think that they will do that, which is maybe the saddest part of all. But I do think that he will be given a longer leash because I do think that Avery's walking into a much better situation.
Oh God, undoubtedly. Like you could not. Okay, we'll kick this can down the road for now. This is a completely separate episode. But suffice it to say, this season has been a disappointment. But, we still have the bowl game to play, and it's funny how the last game on the year can change a lot of people's minds if it goes well. Because you and I remember not enjoying the 2021 season, which was the first year of the show, and there were times that you and I both considered, like, damn, do we really want to do this? Like, after some really tough losses, notably the Texas one. There were times that we're like, well, damn, this is awful.
I've seen a lot of people saying they don't care about the bowl game.
They're lying.
If we win the bowl game, like we beat LSU back in 2021, or I guess that would have been 2022 technically, but if we do that, then I think tunes will change, because then we still end up with a 9-4 record, where we have an upward trajectory moving forward. There's excitement building into next year, and then all spring we get to hear about how everybody's so excited coming off of the bowl win. Everybody wants to continue to compound that positive energy, as opposed to like having to like have your last game be a loss for the next like 7 months.
7-8 months, yeah.
So obviously it's way more fun to win your bowl game. Even if right now it doesn't feel like it's worth it, it totally is. If you win your bowl game, that's awesome. You get a cool trophy. You get to call somebody the MVP of the bowl game. You get to spend the whole offseason prognosticating about how this true freshman who had like a single catch in the bowl game is going to like explode and have like
what we did with RJ?
500 yards. Yeah, exactly. like all of that stuff. Like everyone's going to be able to do that, have a lot of fun. I don't think we're getting a new OC, so unfortunately we won't be able to break down an entirely new offense. But we will maybe see some Avery Johnson. I bet we see Avery Johnson in this bowl game. A significant amount. But I don't know. Bowl games matter. Bowl games absolutely do. If you don't think bowl games matter, I don't think you like college football. And that's not our take.
Why do you hate America if you hate bowl games?
Yeah, it's inherently anti-American, I think, to hate bowl games. I will be reporting you to Joseph McCarthy. But I am very excited for our bowl game, no matter who we play, no matter what bowl game it is, unless it's the Liberty Bowl. If it is the Liberty Bowl, I will not be watching.
But if it's the Liberty Bowl, we're not even doing a preview.
No.
The season's over. We didn't make a bowl game as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, I'd rather miss a bowl game and go to the Liberty Bowl personally. That's the only bowl I'll say it for. I'd rather go to a bowl game that's like lower on the bowl tier than to the Liberty Bowl. I don't think that's a controversial statement.
No,
until they renovate their stadium, which they're supposedly going to be doing. I'll give them another shot when that happens. But I'm still, despite ending on a sour note with this loss, we still had some really fun games at home this year. A lot of blowouts. Where we got to see Avery Johnson have some exciting runs at times. DJ Giddens hopefully is back, and he had a 1,000-yard rushing regular season this year. And that was with splitting carries of Trayshawn Ward. So, a lot to be excited about going forward, at least right now.
Yep. So, that pretty much wraps up this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. If you want to email us, we're aggievillealleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us more personally, I'm at ACEdward00.
I'm at Connor Baltazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store, link in our Twitter and podcast bios. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.